Hey everyone, so I've done a few videos that have touched on the subject of Occupy Wall Street. The first one I did was in response to Eagle Eye, and I attacked his assertion that everyone who supported Occupy Wall Street was basically some like shiftless, lazy, and self-entitled liberal guy who would never work a day in his life and just wanted the government to give him all this money for free off of the backs of rich people, etc., etc., etc. So I basically ripped him to shreds over this assertion because it's not true. The next videos I did talked about basically protest permits being constitutional, which some people didn't understand and felt like making videos about and basically just being douchebags. But moving past that, people have asked me for my actual opinion on the Occupy Wall Street movement. The easiest way to start this off would basically be to say that I think a lot of their general premises are correct. There are quite a bit of, the bankers, Congress, etc., who have taken money from the American taxpayer, basically Main Street, and given it to quite a few rich companies, CEOs, etc., in the bailouts, TARP, whatever. And the American taxpayer hasn't seen a benefit from this. And you see a lot of rich, a lot of these major corporations, a lot of major companies paying out record bonuses to their CEOs and executives whilst firing workers and whilst Main Street is suffering and still has not seen much, if any, of this economic recovery, and unemployment still hovers around 9 or 10%, and they're not seeing a lot of this benefit, and a lot of rich people are not paying in taxes what they should pay. We're talking about cutting social services, talking about cutting government programs, whilst cutting taxes for the rich, like we did under Bush, and like we're still maintaining the Bush tax cuts, and the Republicans still want to keep adding on tax cut after tax cut to this. I think there's a lot of validity to these arguments and complaints. However, I don't really agree with their message. I don't necessarily agree with the whole we're the 99%. First off, I never voted for any of them. I never said they had my permission to speak for me, yet they have the audacity to claim they speak for 99% of the country when they don't. Quite literally, they don't. But sure, if they want to talk about in terms of economics, I'm one of the 99%. That doesn't mean that Occupy Wall Street gets to speak for me, though. And it doesn't get to speak for a lot of other people. Furthermore, I disagree with their, notion that anyone in the 1% who has a lot of money doesn't deserve that money, has been dishonest in getting that money, etc. It's not the trust fund kids who have fucked them over. It's been, bankers, certain CEOs, etc., who have bought out Congress in a lot of ways and have basically lobbied for deregulation, etc. It's not Paris Hilton who's fucked them over, like, say, movie stars, or people just generally have a lot of money. There are specific people that have fucked them over. And so when I hear basically kind of like the 1% are evil, blah, 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 rhetoric I've heard from quite a few people, I view that in the exact same light. I view a lot of, say, Tea Party conservatives saying that poor people are just lazy assholes who are too stupid to get a job. I view them as exactly the same sort of statements. They're not true for the most part. Just because you're rich doesn't mean you fucked over poor people, and just because you're poor definitely doesn't mean you're not lazy or stupid. So that's how I view it. I mean, there's a quote from The West Wing by, Sam Seaborn, while talking to certain progressive, it's like a lobbyist group, I think, of progressives who want tax reform. He says, quote, "Henry, last fall, every time your boss got on the stump and said it's time for the rich to pay their fair share, I hid under a couch and changed my name. I left Gage Whitney making $400,000 a year, which means I paid 27 times the national average in income tax. I paid my fair share, and the fair share of 26 other people. And I'm happy to, because that's the only way it's going to work. And it is in my best interest that everybody be able to go to school and drive on roads. But I don't get 27 votes on election day, the fire department doesn't come to my house 27 times faster, and the water doesn't come out of my faucet 27 times hotter. The top 1% of wage earners in this country pay for 22% of this country. Let's not call them names while they're doing it, is all I'm saying." And that's somewhat of the logic I agree with. Now, there are actually millionaires who have absolutely no liability when it comes to federal income tax. They have no liability. However, about 47% of the country has no liability for federal income tax either. And these people are the ones that disproportionately get the most benefit from social services, which is fine. I mean, I agree with Adam Smith. People should pay into the economy, should pay to the government in proportion to what they get, the benefit they get from the country. So, rich people need to pay more. Adam Smith supported progressive taxation. So do I. It's the only way the system works. But quite a few people don't pay federal income tax, almost half the country. And so when they talk about fair share, I have to kind of look at them and really sit there and say, well, you don't really have any skin in the game when it comes to the taxation system. So is it really fair for them to, vote themselves more stuff when they don't have to pay for it? I mean, honest question, I don't know. Honestly, these people need help, and we should give them help. I mean, I support universal health care, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But at the same time, the rich do pay money for services they never get. Same when you're not even just the rich. Look at, say, if you have property tax, you're paying into public school systems, even if you have no kids, or if your kids go to private school, because that's the only way the system can work, and that's fine. But that's the way the system works. So I just really question this sort of fair share logic, because how you define fair is really up for grabs. There's a lot of ways you can define fair, like, for instance, who uses the most of something should have to pay more into it, sort of thing, or everyone pays equally, or this person has more money, so they should have to pay for more things. I mean, there are multiple ways you can define fair. It's not a universal standard. I think equity is a good way to maybe describe it. There's vertical equity in terms of progressive versus regressive, and then horizontal equity, because there are a lot of problems in terms of how, say, a lot of people are taxed. Like, a lot of rich people can get out of taxes, like the Warren Buffett thing with the secretary, is because his secretary, her wages come from, her income comes from wages, whereas Buffett's mainly come from cap gains and dividends. But let's simplify this. Let's say that person A earns $100,000 from wages, and person B earns $100,000 from cap gains and dividends. Person B is going to have far less of a tax burden than person A, even though they're earning the same amount. That's a flaw. That's horizontal, inequality. Or, there's also things like the child tax credits, the number of dependents, I guess, in general, the homeowners, the mortgage deductions, etc., that screw with the tax system. These things should probably be looked at and changed. I mean, it's why I like the Simpson-Bowles plan, at the very least, because it gets rid of a lot of the loopholes and deductions, lowers the tax rates, but you get more money because people have less loopholes. So things like that need to be done, I guess. But I think my biggest problem with the Occupy Wall Street movement, and I know this is not a majority of the people there, it's mainly a lot of the people I deal with on the internet, who say that, who have spent years attacking Fox News and the Tea Party, etc., for outright lying about various things, twisting news stories to fit their, to suit their needs politically, exaggerating news stories. But then they do it, and then some of them directly defend what they're doing and say it's completely fine because it gets their goals more coverage and more people to pay attention. Like with the Jennifer Fox thing, which is still unproven, I might add. People putting out Facebook and Twitter things saying that, cops kill babies, or various people saying, we should kill the pigs, fuck the police, we should kill all the police. When none of this has been proven, and they justify this by saying, well, it gets us more attention. But then they sit there and attack Fox News for lying or doing the exact same thing. So I think there's a lot of hypocrisy there by some of the supporters of Occupy Wall Street. In general, it's not something I approve of. But also, every time I talk about the Occupy Wall Street thing, I say, all right, you guys have managed to get a lot of attention. You've managed to raise public awareness, even though people already knew about wealth inequality and wanted to raise taxes on the rich. This has been going on for years now. But, okay, you have a lot of attention. You need to start organizing. You need to start identifying people to run for local offices, to run in congressional offices. You need to start organizing and getting something done. And so many people tell me, there's no reason to vote. Voting's stupid. There's going to be, and to the point of there's going to be more change from the Occupy Wall Street camps than there will be from DC. And my response is, okay, are you going to do an armed revolution? No. Okay, but you're not going to vote. So what change do you think is going to happen here? If you're not going to vote, you're not going to try and get people in office who are actually going to do what you want to do and not be beholden to the major corporations, for your narrative where you say major corporations and the 1% have bought out Congress. You need to get people who aren't bought out by them in terms of your narrative. But a lot of people saying a lot of people who support OWS say that's pointless and shouldn't happen. So what change do you expect? The uber rich that you say bought out Congress are not going to change their mind. They're not just going to suddenly say, okay, let's have campaign finance reform and let's re-regulate ourselves. They're not going to do that. So what change do you expect to happen? If you're not willing to vote, if you're not willing to try and get people in office, what change can you honestly expect? In my mind, that's basically admitting your movement's a failure. If you're going to sit there and basically diss the system, but you don't want to rebel against it either, you're just wasting everyone's time. So that's really my feeling, in brief, my feelings about Occupy Wall Street. There's a lot of good points in terms of the basic underlying principles. There's also this concept, I guess this is probably what I'll call the video, admiring the problem. It's basically talked about in government, where everyone gets in a room and they all talk about the problem and they all admire how complex and difficult this problem is. But just talking about how complex and difficult this problem is does nothing towards solving it. So really, action is necessary. You're a little bit under 12 months out for the election next year. If you want change, get people to run. Get people elected. Because, I'm sorry, you're not going to be able to camp out indefinitely. You're just not going to be able to. People will lose interest. Your camps will be shut down. But two, even if you couldn't, just camping out in front of City Hall isn't going to impress anyone after a certain point. You need to actually mobilize and get people elected and work with the system to affect the change you want. Otherwise, you've just been wasting your time.